The branding iron came out of the fire, the color of a sunset, and the girl who held it was 23 years old and had buried her father 11 weeks earlier in ground too frozen to take him properly until April. She had ridden out from the home place before light. Now the sun was full up over the little Laramie, and the first calf of the season lay roped on its side in the dust of the half-moon branding pen, and Margaret Ellison set the iron against its hip and counted under her breath. Unus, duos, tres. She held it the way her father had taught her, the way a woman who knew what she was doing held it, long enough for the hair to burn through to the hide and no longer, because an iron held a heartbeat too long made a blotch that festered, and an iron pulled a heartbeat too soon made a scar so faint a rustler could work it over by August. Quatuor. Quinque. She lifted it clean. The calf bawled and kicked, and the smell of singed hair rolled up off it, and the half-moon brand stood on its hip, dark and even, exactly the shape her father had registered with the territory in 1866. She was aware the whole time of the men watching her. There were 4 of them at the rail. The one in the center was Aldous Renner, who had been foreman of the Half Moon for 30 years and who had not taken his hat off when she rode in. He was 61. He had a face like a saddle left out 3 winters and a way of standing that took up more room than his body did. He had buried Silas Ellison himself in February with 2 of the hands, and he had a great deal to say about a great many things, and he had said none of it yet. He was waiting. They were all waiting, the way men wait who know the Crook outfit on the South Line has wanted this water for 9 years and is watching to see what a dead man's daughter is made of. They had expected. She knew exactly what they had expected because she had been expecting them to expect it the whole ride out. They had expected the Boston girl to ride up side saddle in a black morning dress, to weep prettily at the corral fence, to ask which of them would be so kind as to run the place for her until a husband could be found. They had expected to be needed. Meg let the rope go slack, and the calf scrambled up and bolted for its mother, and she turned and walked to the rail and laid the iron back across the top rail to cool. Her gloves were her father's. They were too big, and she had stuffed the fingers with wool. Her divided riding skirt was canvas, the color of dust, because it was 3/4 dust by now, and she wore a man's flannel shirt under a sheepskin vest, and her father's hat with the brim pulled low, and she had not wept at the corral fence, and there was no morning dress within 500 miles of her. "You held it 5 seconds," Renner said.
"I did."
"Most men hold it 3. Most men make a blotch and lose the calf to screwworm in July." She pulled the right glove off, finger by finger. "My father held it 5. He taught me on the South Range when I was 9. You were there, Mr. Renner. You handed him the iron." The thing moved behind his eyes. She watched it move. The recalculation of a man who has built a morning's plan on one assumption and just felt the assumption go out from under him like river ice. He had known Cyrus Ellison had a daughter back east. He had not known the daughter could brand. "That was a long time ago," he said.
"It was 14 years ago.
"I was sent to my aunt in Boston the spring after my mother died. I came back twice, the summer I was 16 and the summer I was 19. She set the glove on the rail beside the iron. "Both times I branded. You weren't here the summer I was 19. You were driving the beef to Cheyenne. I did the spring works that year with Halloran and the Mexican boy, whose name I am ashamed to say I have forgotten." "Reyes," said one of the men at the rail very quietly. He was young and he was looking at her now in a way the others were not. "Reyes," she said. "Thank you." Renner did not like it. She could see he did not like that one of his own had supplied her with the name, had taken her side in the smallest possible way, and she filed that away, that the line was not solid, that there were seams in it, and she kept her face still, the way she had learned to keep it still in a Beacon Hill drawing room when her aunt's friends asked whether the West had quite ruined her, and she waited. "Miss Ellison," he said it the way you would set something down that you did not want to drop on your foot. "I'll speak plain. Your father and I had an understanding. I'm sure you did. He told me, the autumn before he passed, that if anything happened to him, the place was to be sold. To me, at a fair figure, with terms, over 5 years. That was his wish. Was it in writing?" A pause. The wind came up off the river and worried at the brim of her hat, and she did not lift her hand to it.
It was a man's word,
Renner said, "between two men who'd worked the same ground 3 decades. We didn't put a thing like that on paper. We weren't that kind." "No," Meg said. "I don't imagine you were." She looked past him, out at the bottomland where the cattle were strung along the willows, 4,000 head, near enough, of half-moon stock, carrying her father's mark, and beyond them, the long blue lift of the Laramie Range, with the snow not yet off the high parks. And she let him see her looking at all of it, because all of it was hers, and she wanted him to watch her know it. "Here is what is in writing, Mr. Renner. My father's will, recorded at the Territorial Courthouse in Laramie City on the 4th of November, 1878, 3 months before he died. It leaves the half-moon, the deeded sections, the water on the Little Laramie, the brand, and all stock carrying it, to his daughter, Margaret. There is no clause about a sale. There is no mention of your name." She paused. "I've read it. I have a certified copy in my saddlebag. I'll read it to you if you like, though I expect you'd rather I didn't, in front of the men." The young one, the one who had said Reyes, looked down at his boots. Renner's jaw worked. He was a proud man, and he was a grieving man. She would understand that part later, the grief, would understand it almost too late. And right now, he was a man who had been told, in front of 3 of his own riders, by a girl in her dead father's gloves, that the thing he had counted on for the rest of his working life was not going to happen. He had been wrong before. He had told himself he would not be wrong about this. "A ranch," he said, "is not a piece of paper. A ranch is 4,000 head of cattle that have to be gathered and branded and trailed and wintered, and it is 16 men who have to be paid and fed and kept from killing each other. And it is the Crook outfit on your south line that has wanted this water for 9 years and will want it harder now. There's only a woman standing on it." He leaned in, not far, just enough. "You can hold that paper over your head all the way to the bank in Laramie, Miss Ellison. The cattle don't read." It was, she thought, the most honest thing anyone had said to her since the train left Omaha. It was also a threat, dressed in the clothes of practical advice, and she respected him a little for getting both of them into one sentence. "Then it's fortunate," she said, "that I can." She picked the iron up off the rail. It had cooled to black. She turned it in her hand so the half-moon caught the light. And she looked at it, this thing her father had carried, and for the first time that morning, something went through her that was not strategy, that she had not planned and could not use, and she let it pass without showing it. 312 calves to brand before the gather's done," she said. "We're behind. The Crook outfit branded out 2 weeks ago. I passed their pen on the way up from the depot. We'll work until the light goes." Mr. Renner, I'd be obliged if you'd run the irons. You're faster than I am, and we haven't the days to spare on my pride. She handed it to him, handle first. I'll rope. It was the smartest thing she did that day, and she had done several smart things. She did not take the place away from him. She gave him the iron.
She put herself on the horse,
In the dust, doing the harder, dirtier work, and she put the old man where his skill was, and she made the two of them, for the length of an afternoon, a crew. Renner took the iron. He did not thank her, but he took it. I have seen the brand. It is in a glass case now, in a county museum in Wyoming. I will not name precisely, because the family still runs cattle on that ground, and they have asked, reasonably, not to be made into a tourist stop. The iron is shorter than you would think. The half-moon is no bigger than a child's hand. The handle is worn to a shine on the underside where a thumb rode it, the same thumb, for a great many years.
when I held it,
They let me hold it, with cotton gloves, which made me think of the wool-stuffed gloves, and made me have to set it down for a moment. The first thing I understood was that it was a tool, and the second thing I understood was that whoever had carried it last had carried it with great care for a very long time, and the third thing I understood I will keep until the end of this account, because it belongs there. She roped until dark. She was not the best roper on the half-moon. That was the young one, whose name was Eli Strand, and who would matter later. But she was good, and she did not miss often, and when she missed, she did not apologize for it, which the men noticed more than the roping. By the time the light went orange and then grey over the river, they had branded 110 head, and her right shoulder was a single deep ache, and her hands inside her father's gloves had blistered, and the blisters had broken, and she had said nothing about it.
that evening,
She walked the home corral alone while the men ate. On the heavy snubbing post in the center of the round pen, the post her father had set himself, there were marks, knife marks, tally marks, cut in groups of 5, 4 upright and 1 across, going up the post in neat columns, some old and silvered, some not old at all. She knew what they were. He had counted his calf crop on that post every spring of her childhood, cut a notch for each tally of 100, because he did not trust a number he could not put his hand on. The newest column was cut in a different hand, heavier, the strokes deeper, Renner's hand. He had gone on counting after Cyrus died. He had branded out a calf crop in the spring, alone, for a dead man, and cut the tally in the post the way the dead man had taught him. She stood there a long time with her broken hand flat against the cuts. The next morning, the letter came up from Laramie with the freight.
it was on the heavy cream paper of a bank,
And it was addressed to Margaret Ellison, and it informed her, in the regretful and immovable language such letters use, that the late Cyrus Ellison had borrowed $4,000 against the Half Moon Ranch in the autumn of 1877, that the note was held by the First Stockman's Bank of Laramie, that it had been endorsed over, and here Meg read the sentence twice, and then a third time, to Mr. Silas Crook of the Crook Land and Cattle Company, and that the full sum, with interest, would fall due on the first day of November. She had 6 months. She had 4,000 head of cattle she could not legally sell out from under a debt that size without the bank's leave, and the bank's leave now lived in the pocket of the one man in the territory who had wanted her water for 9 years.
she folded the letter once.
Along the line, the bank had already creased into it, and she put it inside her shirt, against her ribs, where she could feel the corner of it. Then she went to find Renner, because there was branding to do, and because she had decided, somewhere between the first reading and the third, that she was not going to tell him about the letter yet, and she wanted to look at him while she did not tell him, to see if his face already knew. They came down the South Line on the third morning, 6 riders, while the dew was still on the sage. Meg saw the dust before she saw the men, a low brown smear hanging in the still air above the river road, and she had the glass on them before Renner came up beside her, and she counted them aloud. 6, she said, before she caught herself and said it again in English, and handed him the glass without being asked. Crooks, Renner said. He did not need the glass. He had been reading dust on that line for 30 years. That's Del Mabor on the grey, that's his range boss. Crook don't ride himself. He sends Mabor when he wants you to know he's thought about you. What does he want? To look at the water, to look at you, to let you see him looking. Renner spat to the side, a small, precise punctuation. Same thing he's wanted 9 years. The difference is, your father could look back. She rode out to meet them. Renner did not tell her to.
He did not tell her not to either,
Which was, from him, a kind of permission. And she took 2 men with her, Eli Strand and an older hand named Pruitt, who had a Winchester in a saddle scabbard and the settled, unhurried manner of a man who had used one. And she rode out across the bottomland in her father's hat, with her own hands bare on the reins, and she stopped her horse a polite 40 feet from the grey and waited for Mabor to speak first. Because the one who speaks first in a thing like that has conceded that the silence belonged to the other. Mabor was a heavy man with a clean shave in a country where most men did not bother, and that told her something, that he worked for a man who valued the look of the thing, who paid for shaves. He looked at her a while. You'd be the daughter, he said. I'd be the owner. A flicker. Behind him, one of the riders, a boy younger than Eli, grinned, and then put the grin away. Mabor did not grin.
Mr. Crook sends his condolences on your father.
Cyrus was a hard man to deal with, but he was square, and there's not many you can say that of. He let it sit. Mr. Crook also wanted me to mention, neighbourly, that he holds paper on this place now. He bought it off the bank. He'd as soon never call it. He's not a man to put a woman off her land in her grief, whatever you've heard of him. He'd sooner make you an offer that leaves you well fixed. There's a good house to be had in Laramie. A young woman of your education, you'd not want to spend it counting cattle in the wind. So he knew about the education. Crook had asked about her. That was worth knowing.
Tell Mr. Crook, Meg said,
That I am obliged to him for his condolences, and that I read the bank's letter, and that the note falls due on the 1st of November, and that I will meet it on the 1st of November, and that until the 1st of November, this is my water, and my grass, and my line, and that his men are sitting on the wrong side of it. She gathered her reins. Tell him I count my cattle every evening. Tell him I'll know the number. It was a small thing, and it was not a small thing. Mabor's eyes moved, just barely, to Pruitt's scabbard and back, and she understood that she had said the one sentence that a cattleman in that country could not pretend not to hear. Because to say, I count my cattle every evening on a contested line in 1879 was to say, I will know to the head if you take so much as one. And on the open range, where a baron's profit was made and unmade by the quiet attrition of other men's calves, that was not a courtesy. That was a notice. Mabor touched his hat, which she had not expected, and turned the grey, and took his 6 men back up the south line into their own dust. Eli let out a breath beside her. That was Del Mabor, he said. Folks don't generally hand Del Mabor his hat. I didn't hand him anything. I gave him a message to carry. There's a difference, and Mr. Crook will know it, even if Mr. Mabor doesn't. She turned her horse for home. Her hands were shaking on the reins, and she let them, because there was no one looking who mattered, and because her father had told her once, the summer she was 9, that the trick was not to never be afraid. The trick, he had said, was to do the thing with the hands that shook. I should say here, because this is the place where you are owed it, how she came to be a woman who could ride out to meet 6 of Silas Crook's men with her hands shaking and her voice level.
The records on this part are thin,
And what I have is mostly from the letters. She wrote to her aunt in Boston twice a week, on Tuesdays and Fridays, in a hand small enough to fit 8 lines on a single sheet of stage-line stationery, because the proper paper had not reached the territory, and what arrived was either thin or did not arrive at all. And the letters are not always frank, because she did not want the old woman to worry, and so some of this I have had to read in the spaces between what she wrote. She was born on the half-moon in 1856. Her mother was a Laramie woman, not an Eastern import, and Meg rode before she walked, in the way of ranch children, and her father, who had no son and made no apology for it, taught her the place from the ground up, taught her to read brands and sign cuts, to throw a loop, to set an iron, to tell by the set of a cow's tail an hour before she calved whether the calf was coming right or coming backward. Then her mother died of a fever in the spring of 1870, and Cyrus Ellison, who could face a dry drive and a hard winter and the Crook outfit, but could not face a 14-year-old daughter, motherless in a house full of men, did what he believed was the right thing, and the loving thing, and the thing he regretted, by his own letters, for the rest of his life. He sent her east, to his late wife's sister on Beacon Hill, to be made into a lady. And she was made into one. That is the part the men at the rail could not see, and the part that mattered most. She learned the Latin that her aunt Set thought ornamental, and she found useful. She could read a deed and a brand registry and a bank's small print, and she could hold a number in Latin in her head while her hands did something else, which is a stranger and more practical skill than it sounds. She learned the etiquette of a Boston drawing room, which is to say, she learned how to keep her face still while powerful people decided her future in front of her. And that lesson she would spend in a branding pen and a territorial courtroom rather than a parlor. But it was the same lesson. She learned which fork. She also learned, in the long, grey Boston winters, sitting at a window that looked at brick, exactly how much she wanted to go home. She did not run from a forced marriage. I want to be careful here, because the easy version of this story has her fleeing a cruel suitor, and there was a suitor, a Beacon Hill banker's son named— the letters give only an initial, a capital H, and I will not invent the rest of him. And he was not cruel. He was merely the wrong life, and she returned his interest along with the small ring he had pressed on her in the front hall, without a scene, 2 days before her father's death reached her by telegram. The telegram and the broken understanding fall in the same week of the letters, and I confess I cannot always tell which sentence is grieving which loss. She came west because her father had left her the half-moon, and because the half-moon was the only place on earth she had ever wanted to be. That is the whole of it. It is less romantic than the other version, and it is true, and she would have preferred the truth. She said as much, years later, to a newspaper man who tried to make her into a heroine and got, for his trouble, a cup of coffee and a correction. If you came to this account for the women who carried a deed in one hand and held an iron in the other, the small button beneath this telling keeps such stories coming, and that is all I will ask of you. The romance, since there was one, and you will have guessed it, did not announce itself. It arrived as work. His name was Tom Hale, and he ran a smaller outfit on the far side of the Crook land, and he had been, before the cattle, an army scout in the Sioux campaigns, which he did not talk about and which showed only in the way he looked at ground, reading it always for who had crossed it and when. He came over the second week, ostensibly to return a strayed half-moon steer that had drifted onto his grass. Actually, Meg suspected, and never confirmed, because the whole country had heard that Cyrus Ellison's daughter had ridden out to meet Del Maybor, and he wanted to see the woman who'd done it. He did not say so. He drove the steer into her corral, and he touched his hat, and he was about to ride off when the storm that had been building all afternoon over the Laramie Range broke early and hard, and the question of his leaving became academic. The wind took the loose half of the hay barn roof first, the half her father had been meaning to re-nail for 2 years, and then it went after the carving shed, where 11 heavy heifers were penned out of the weather, and a carving shed coming apart in a Wyoming spring storm with first calf heifers inside it is a thing that kills cattle and sometimes kills people, and there was no one to ask whether the neighbor should stay. He swung down and started hauling on the shed door to hold it, and shouted something the wind ate, and Meg ran for the rope. They worked in the storm for 2 hours. They did not talk beyond what the work required. There, lift, hold, my side. He was strong, and she was quick, and they were both unhurried in the particular way of people who have learned that panic in weather is what gets you hurt. And somewhere in the second hour, she realized she was working beside him the way she had worked beside her father, in that wordless dovetailing where each one's hands knew where the other's would be, and she understood, with the part of her mind that was not occupied with the heifers, that this was rare, that she had had it with exactly one person in her life, and that person was under the April ground, and that she had just found it again in a stranger in a thunderstorm. She did not make anything of it. She filed it away, the way she filed away Eli saying Reyes, as information about where the seams were. When the storm blew through, the carving shed was standing, and the heifers were alive, and the hay barn had lost half its roof. They stood in the wreck of the yard, both of them soaked through, water running off the brim of her father's hat, and Tom Hale looked at the standing shed and then at her. "Your father set those corner posts a foot deeper than was needful," he said. "That's why she held. A man told me once Cyrus Ellison never trusted a thing he couldn't anchor. He grew up in Kansas tornado country. That'd do it." He almost smiled. He didn't quite. "You'll want to get a man up on that barn roof before the next one." "I'll get up on the barn roof," Meg said, "before the next one." And he looked at her a moment, and then he did smile, just at the corner, and he touched his hat and rode off into the clearing weather, and she stood in the wrecked yard and watched him go, and did not let herself watch him too long. The grief came 2 days after that, and it did not come from where she was watching. She found Renner at the far end of the home pasture in the early evening, standing at the fence line above the river, where the ground rose to a low knuckle of land with a single cottonwood on it, and she rode up before she saw what he was standing over, and then she saw it. A grave. The earth still settled wrong the way new graves settle, a plain board at the head with a name burned into it. Her father's name. She had not known where they had put him. She had asked, the first day, and Renner had said, "Up by the river," and she had been too proud or too afraid to ask him to take her, and he had been too something to offer. "February," Renner said. He did not turn around. Ground was froze 2 foot down, Took me and Pruitt and the Strand boy a day and a half with a fire going on it overnight to soften it enough. We couldn't get him deep as I'd have liked. I built the box myself. I'm no carpenter. The lid don't sit square. His voice did a thing then that she had not heard it do. He was my friend 30 years. He hired me when I was a green hand couldn't sit a horse, and he never once held it over me after, not the whole 30 years, when other men would have. And then he up and dies in February and leaves me a girl I never met and a paper with no offer in it, and He stopped. The wind moved the cottonwood. I knew there was a will. He told me what was in it. I just thought, a man tells himself things at the end about what's owed him. I'm 61 years old, Miss Ellison. This was to be my place. And it ain't. And that's the law. And the law's right. And I have been a poor sort of welcome to you, because every time I look at you, I see he's truly gone. And I had not let myself believe that until you rode in wearing his gloves. She got down off the horse. She stood beside the old man at her father's grave, and she did not touch him, because she understood he would not have wanted to be touched. And she did not offer him the place, because the place was not hers to give away as comfort, and he would have despised the offer. She gave him the only true thing she had. He wrote about you, she said. Every letter. Renner says, Renner thinks. Renner's after me to fix the barn roof. For 14 years, I knew you better than I knew most of the people I sat at table with. I thought when I came back that I'd have my father a little while longer through you. That's the other thing the will didn't say, and I'd have liked it to. I came back too late for him. I didn't mean to come back too late for the only other man who knew him. Renner was quiet a long time. Then he took his hat off. For the grave, she thought at first, and then understood it was not only for the grave. There's a heifer, he said roughly, going to calve tonight or tomorrow, the brockle-faced one, and she's narrow in the hip, and it's her first, and it's going to come hard, or it's going to come backward, and I've half a mind it's tonight. Your father'd have sat up with her. I was going to send the Strand boy. He put his hat back on. You want to learn this place from the ground up, the way he had it. That's a place to start. I'll show you the way he did it. He had a way. I know the way he did it, Meg said. He showed me when I was 9. The old man looked at her. Something in his face that had been clenched for 11 weeks let go by some small degree. Then I'll sit up with you, he said, and we'll see who remembers it right. That was the night everything turned, though neither of them knew it yet, and I will tell it properly in its place, because it deserves its own telling, and because it is where this stops being a story about a deed and a debt, and becomes a story about the thing the deed and the debt were only ever the frame around. But before that night was over, 2 things happened that I have to set down here. The first is that the brockle-faced heifer did not calve that night. She calved the following night, and that night Renner was 8 miles off in Laramie, and Tom Hale was on his own range, and the only people on the half-moon who knew how to turn a backward calf were Meg and a 16-year-old with steady hands. And the heifer was down and straining, and the calf was coming tail first, and there was no one to send for. The second is that when Meg went to the strongbox in her father's office that evening to fetch the certified will, because Renner, having made his peace, had asked, gently, almost shyly, to read for himself the document that had ended his 30-year hope, and she had decided he had earned the reading. She found, folded behind the will in her father's strongbox, in her father's hand, a second paper she had not known existed. It was a tally. Not the post-tally, a written one, dated the November before he died, a careful column of figures in the firm, small hand she would have known anywhere, counting the half-moon herd by range and by age. And the number at the bottom of her father's count, made 5 months before any of Crook's men or Renner's spring works had touched the cattle, was 4,240 head. She had counted the herd herself, 3 evenings running, off the post and off the ground, the way he had taught her. She made it 3,810. 430 head of half-moon cattle had gone somewhere between her father's last November and her first May, and a calf crop branded out in between. And she stood in the lamplight of her dead father's office with the 2 numbers in her 2 hands and felt the whole shape of the thing tilt under her, because 430 head was not weather, and it was not wolves, and it was not the ordinary leak of the open range. 430 head was a man, and the only men who had been on that ground all winter, with the cattle, with a free hand and a dead owner, were her own. She put both papers back in the box. She did not yet know who. She did not yet know that the one number she could trust completely was the one cut in the post by a grieving old man who could not have stolen a calf from his dead friend's herd if his life hung on it. That the tally post, which her father had built so he could put his hand on a number, was about to become the only honest witness on the half-moon. She knew only that the debt fell due in October, that someone had been bleeding the herd that had to pay it, and that she was going to have to find out who, while pretending to all 16 of them that she suspected no one at all. She blew out the lamp. In the dark she could hear, from the carving shed, the brockle-faced heifer beginning, a night early by Renner's reckoning, to be in trouble. The brockle-faced heifer was down on her side in the straw, with her flanks heaving, when Meg came into the carving shed with the lantern, and one look told her the thing she had been dreading, and the thing her father had taught her to read an hour before it became a crisis. 2 small hooves showing at the heifer's hind end, soles up. The calf was coming backward. A backward calf is a race against a clock no one can see. Once the calf's hips clear and the cord pins against the mother's pelvis, the calf is cut off from her blood, and it will try to breathe, and there is fluid where the air should be, and you have minutes. Not many. She set the lantern down on the dirt floor, on the dirt, well clear of the straw, because she had read, in a newspaper sent to her in Boston, of a whole barn, and the 30 head in it lost to a lantern hung in the hay. And she had thought even then, before any of this was hers, what a needless way to lose everything that is. And she stripped off her vest and rolled her sleeve to the shoulder and knelt behind the heifer. Eli came in behind her, 16 and white around the mouth. "Should I ride for Mr. Renner?" "Mr. Renner's 8 miles off in Laramie, and this calf has about 10 minutes. "No." She had her hand in now, feeling along the wet curve of the calf's hock, finding the hips, finding the cord. "Listen to me, Eli. I'm going to need you to do exactly what I say the second I say it, not a half second after. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Get the carving rope. 2 loops, you'll see I've notched the ends. Around the hocks, above the joint, not below. Below, and you pull the foot off and lose the calf, and likely the cow. Above the joint." Her voice had gone flat and even, the voice she had heard her father use exactly twice, both times when something was dying or about to. "We pull when she pushes. With her, never against her. We pull down toward her hocks, not straight back. Down. Like we're trying to touch the calf's nose to the ground. It'll never see if we're slow. You pull when I say pull, and you stop when I say stop, and we do not panic, because the panic is what kills them. Your father didn't teach you that, but mine did, and now I'm teaching you. Loops on, now. I have wondered, reading her account of this night, she set it down years later, in a hand grown larger and less careful with age, for a granddaughter who had asked, whether she knew, while it was happening, that Tom Hale's hired man had seen the lantern from the south fence and gone to fetch his employer, and that Tom Hale was at that moment riding the 8 dark miles between his place and hers, not because anyone had sent for him, but because a light burning in a carving shed at 2 in the morning means trouble in any language the frontier spoke. She did not know. She found out when the shed door opened on the worst of it, the calf half out and not breathing, and the heifer past her strength. And a man's voice she had heard once in a thunderstorm said low, "Tell me where to put my hands." They got the calf out together. It came in a rush, the way they do at the last, slick and heavy and silent. And Meg cleared its mouth with 2 fingers, and Tom swung it up by the hind legs to drain the fluid. And she rubbed it down hard with a twist of straw. Hard, harder than seemed kind, because the rubbing is what tells a new thing on a cold night that it is worth the trouble of living. And for a long moment, the calf hung between, and then it coughed, a small, wet, astonished cough, and shook its head and breathed. Nobody said anything for a while. The heifer heaved herself around and began, exhausted, to lick her calf. Eli sat down abruptly in the straw and put his face in his hands, and Meg understood he was crying and did not look at him to let him keep it. She herself was shaking again, the hands again, and she let them. Tom Hale was looking at her across the calf, the lantern between them, throwing everything up gold and enormous, and there was a thing in his face she would not let herself read, because she did not have time for it, and because the having time for it, later, would matter more than anything she could feel at 2 in the morning with blood to the shoulder. "Your father teach you that?" he said. "My father taught me that." "He taught you good." He stood, and his knees cracked, and he almost smiled. "There's a man been telling it all over the county that Cyrus Ellison's girl come out from Boston to play at ranching till she finds a husband to do it for her." He picked his hat up off the rail. "I believe I'll go on contradicting him." It was not a declaration.
It was better than a declaration.
She held it in her 2 bloody hands all the rest of that night and well into the grey of the morning. And she did not make anything of it, and she made everything of it, both at once, which is the only honest way a thing like that is ever held. The matter of the 430 head she had to solve alone, and quietly, and it took her the better part of 3 weeks, and I will give you the shape of it rather than the daily grind, because the daily grind was cattle work, and you have had enough of cattle work to trust that she did it. She did not suspect Renner. She had thought it through the night she found the second tally and dismissed him before she had finished thinking, and not from sentiment, from the post. A man stealing his dead friend's cattle does not keep cutting the dead friend's tally honestly into the dead friend's snubbing post where anyone might read it.
He cut the count true,
Because the count was sacred to him. The post was the one place on the half-moon that could not lie, and Renner would no more have falsified it than spat on the grave. So she set the post tally against her father's written November count and against the county's record at Laramie, of which brands had changed hands at sale over the winter. There was a record. That was the thing the thief had not reckoned with, that the territory kept a brand book, that a registered brand was a property record like a deed, that to sell a branded animal honestly, a man left a paper trail, however thin. and that a Boston-educated woman who could read a bank's small print could certainly read a brand book. And the three honest numbers, laid side by side, drew a box around the missing weeks and the missing country, the upper North Range, in the dead of winter, when the snow would have hidden the tracks and the cattle were drifted, and a man could cut out 40 head at a time and push them over a low pass onto grass that was not half-moon grass, without a soul the wiser. 40 head at a time, onto grass that was not half-moon grass. She rode the North Pass herself, with Pruitt and his Winchester, on a clear, cold morning in early June, and on the far side of it, on Crook land and cattle range, in a brushy draw, a careful distance from any road, she found 30-odd head, wearing a brand she had never seen on any registry. A brand that was a half-moon, with a single added bar through it, turning Cyrus Ellison's mark into something a careless eye would read as a different outfit's iron entirely. A worked brand. The half-moon made over. And she knew then that it was not a stranger, and it was not, in the simple sense, Silas Crook, because Crook, for all his appetite, was too careful a man to keep stolen stock wearing a half-worked brand on his own grass, where a brand inspector might trip over it. It was someone who had needed the cattle moved before they could be properly remarked and sold, someone who had run out of winter. And it was someone who had known the North Range was drifted, and the owner was dead, and the new owner was a girl from Boston, who would not, they had assumed, ever ride the North Pass herself. The man was Del Maybor. He had been bleeding the half-moon all winter for his own pocket, not Crook's, building a stake to start his own outfit, the brand book would later show, in another county, and using his employer's wanted this water reputation as the cover that would draw every suspicion away from him and toward Crook. It was clever. It was very nearly perfect. It failed on one thing only, which was that the dead man had built a post no one could falsify and raised a daughter who could read 3 records and ride a pass. She did not confront him on the range. She was not a fool, and she had Pruitt and 1 rifle against whatever Maybor had. She rode home, and she wrote it all out. The 3 numbers, the worked brand, the location, the dates the brand book gave for Maybor's quiet sales in the next county, in the small, clear hand, and she took it to the one arena where her particular skills counted for more than a fast horse or a faster gun. She took it to the county seat and the brand inspector and the territorial court. The reckoning came on a Tuesday. No, I have it from the court calendar that it was a Wednesday, the 11th of June. The family law says Tuesday, and the family law is wrong on the day and right on everything that mattered, which is the usual proportion. It came in the courthouse at Laramie City in the matter of certain half-moon cattle, with Silas Crook present because his range and his range boss were named, and Crook came expecting to defend himself, and found, to his considerable interest, that the woman was not accusing him at all. She stood up when the judge asked her to. There is a detail here the family kept, and I believe entirely because it is too plain to have been invented. She had meant to wear the one good dark dress she had brought from Boston, the proper thing for a courtroom, and she put it on that morning and looked at herself in it and took it off again, and rode to Laramie in her working clothes, in the canvas skirt and the flannel shirt and her father's hat, with her own clean hands, because she had decided that the court should see exactly what a half-moon owner looked like, and that the half-moon owner looked like a person who worked. She laid out the 3 records. She explained the brand book to a courtroom that mostly already knew how it worked, and 1 or 2 of whom had been quietly hoping she did not. She produced her father's November tally in his own hand, and the post-tally cut by Renner. Renner was there. Renner had ridden in beside her and sat in the front row with his hat on his knees. And she walked the judge through the arithmetic the way she might have walked Eli through a backward calf, without heat, without a single adjective applied to Del Maybor, letting the numbers do to the man what no amount of fury could have done. "By the rules of this territory," she said near the end, and I have the clerk's note of it, close to verbatim, "a brand is a property record, and altering one is a crime. And I can show the court the altered brand, the stolen stock, and the dates of sale. I am not asking the court to take a woman's word over a man's. I am asking the court to read." She set the brand book down on the rail. The cattle don't read, but the record does, and it has been reading all winter, and it says what it says. It is a quiet sentence, and it ended a man.
Maybor, who was not in the room,
He had not come. He had, the marshal would discover, already started moving the stock he had left, was indicted before noon and taken near the Colorado line a week after. Silas Crook, who had ridden in to defend himself and instead watched a girl from Boston hand him the man who had been robbing the neighbor he coveted and souring the whole country against him in the bargain, did a thing that surprised everyone, including himself. In the hall outside the courtroom, in front of witnesses, he told Margaret Ellison that he had been wrong about her father's daughter, that the note he held would be carried at the bank's own rate and no worse for as long as she liked, and that the Crook outfit would buy half-moon beef at top Cheyenne price that fall and every fall she cared to sell, and that the water on the Little Laramie was hers, and he would trouble her about it no more. He was not a good man, and this was not a conversion. It was an old cattle baron recognizing, the way such men did, exactly who he was now dealing with, and adjusting his arithmetic accordingly. It came to the same thing. The debt that had stood over the whole spring like weather simply ceased to be weather. She paid it on the 1st of November, in beef, at top price, exactly as she had told Del Maybor on the South Line that she would. Renner she kept on as foreman until he was too old to ride, and then she kept him on anyway, and he taught the Strand boy everything Cyrus had taught him, and the post went on getting its honest tally cut into it every spring, by Renner's hand and then by Eli's, in groups of 5, 4 upright and 1 across. Tom Hale she married in the autumn of 1880, in the front room of the home place, with the barn roof finally re-nailed. She had got up on it herself before the next storm, exactly as she'd said. And I will give their courtship the same restraint they gave it, which is to say, none of it is here, except for one thing, which is that on the night the backward calf lived, in the gold light of the lantern set safe on the dirt floor, he had taken her bloody right hand in both of his and held it, just held it, for about the length of 3 slow breaths, and then he had let it go, because